Hi, I'm Greg Dell, and I'm here with Rachel Alters. How are you, Rachel?
I'm good, Greg. Thank you.
And I was just looking and preparing for today. It's been about 2 years since I did my last video on Prudential. And back when I did that video, I was like, well, Prudential's up to their old tricks. And in asking you to join me for this video today, I wanted to know what your experience was recently with Prudential, because I know I've handled probably another 100 cases since I did that video back in 2013. And you said I happen to be working on one right now that it's kind of traditional vintage Prudential denial of a disability claim. So give us some background for the people watching this video about what happened in your case and what do you think the outcome is going to be?
Well, I represent a client who has a very important job. She works for the government and she's a lobbyist, and she probably was making upwards of $250,000 a year working at her job, and she's very smart. She contracted Lyme disease and all of a sudden started developing cognitive issues. She couldn't focus, she couldn't think, she was fatigued and unable to work. So she filed a disability claim with Prudential. She also has some back issues on top of all that, and she hasn't worked in probably over a year and a half. They denied her claim, saying that they didn't even believe she had Lyme, and we filed one appeal, the mandatory appeal, and we had a neuropsych examination done, and our neuropsychologist found that she was cognitively impaired. After the extensive appeal we filed, they still said, we still don't believe that she's disabled. We don't even think she has Lyme.
Okay, so just to maybe sidetrack you a minute,
Sure.
you talked about them saying to you, well, we don't believe Lyme exists. And I know you've handled a lot of cases for Lyme disease, and we're seeing more and more, unfortunately,
Right.
as Lyme seems to becoming more and more chronic, or maybe they're getting better at diagnosing it. But why is it that we're seeing a lot of disability carriers are saying Lyme doesn't exist, whereas you have multiple doctors treating, your client saying it does exist?
Well, Greg, there's two schools of thought with Lyme disease. There are those doctors who believe that once you're treated with antibiotics, after that antibiotic regimen is finished, you no longer have Lyme, and chronic Lyme doesn't exist. There's another school of thought that believes that chronic Lyme does exist, that even though you do receive the antibiotics, you still have the disease in your system, and you can't get rid of it for some reason. It just lies in your system, and it continues to cause you problems both physically and cognitively. So it depends on who what doctors you ask. Of course, the insurance companies, they're going to hire the doctors who don't believe in chronic Lyme.
I mean, this was the same issue we were dealing with years ago when people said fibromyalgia doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And chronic fatigue doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And wasn't there some legislation passed recently about Lyme? What was that about? There was something that you had mentioned to me just recently about some kind of initiative that was passed.
Well, certain states, each state, is reviewing the Lyme issue on its own, and I believe that I think it was New Jersey, it could have been New York, but it might have been New Jersey, just recognized that chronic Lyme does exist. So the states are now starting to recognize this, and as that happens, it's going to be harder and harder for the insurance companies to fight these Lyme claims, because there is objective proof that a person has Lyme. There are tests, unlike fibromyalgia, where you really can't take a test. There are tests that show you have Lyme.
And one of the things we found is that we see these doctors challenging the tests that do objectively verify Lyme disease. You have other doctors say, well, that test isn't reliable, it's not accurate. But what's being used to challenge these tests are studies that are being funded by the insurance companies.
Right.
So you have the insurance companies paying to fund studies to try to find that these tests are unreliable, and then they use those studies to try to challenge our clients' exact claims for Lyme disease. So that's like the ultimate conflict of interest. And then, they hire these doctors that were involved with these studies. So it's a full circle chain, in my opinion, borderline corrupt. And I'm not calling out a particular company on who's doing it, but it's something that's just known that that's what's going on with the medical studies. So,
Right.
I mean, that was just a little sidetrack on Lyme disease, because there's lots of people who call us about that. But
Sure.
so in back to your case about you did the appeals, and typical, what we tend to now see as a trend, although you've won a fair amount of Lyme disease claims.
Yes.
Well, she doesn't have Lyme. So what was the next step that you took after these appeals?
Well, we filed a lawsuit because they didn't want to pay her. And so we filed a lawsuit in federal court, which is normally what happens in these ERISA cases. They're filed in federal court. And we're demanding that she get paid her benefits that she's owed. Now, she's young, and she doesn't think she's going to be able to go back to work, especially in her occupation, because of her cognitive issues and So we're
Right.
fighting for her.
And in your claim, was it a
Yeah.
maximum benefit of 10,000 or 15,000?
Probably 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's so disturbing to me is here you have a young lady you're representing. She's like 40 years old, and she was making $250,000 a year. Why would she fake an illness, saying I have cognitive difficulties, I can't go back to my job for $250,000 because I want you, Prudential Insurance Company to pay me $10,000 a month,
Right.
$120,000 a year taxable versus the $250,000 taxable I was making, half the amount of money.
Right. It doesn't make sense because she wouldn't do that, because she was earning so much money. She's very educated. She has a bright future. She has potential to earn even more, and she wants nothing more than to go back to work and continue in her career that she worked so hard to build. But she's just, due to her Lyme disease and her condition, she's unable to do so.
Now, in your case, did they have a doctor examine her?
They have not. We did the neuropsych evaluation. They did a paper review of the neuropsych evaluation and disagreed with our neuropsychologist's findings.
Right. So how do they render an opinion about what she can or can't do when they haven't even so much as they haven't looked at her?
Nope.
They haven't even seen her.
Nope.
So
No.
how do they how could they say we acted reasonably when, it's like if you have a medical condition and you don't go to the doctor's never seen you, they won't even call in a prescription for you without looking at you. So how
Right.
could this particular doctor who's never even seen this claimant make a determination that she's able to return to work without even seeing her?
Well, it's our position that they can't. The position that we take is that we had all of her doctors who physically see her in their office. They examine her, they treat her over a period of time, and they formulate opinions about her condition and her ability to work. And Prudential goes ahead and hires experts, they're hired guns to just do medical paper reviews and formulate opinions on my client's ability to work when they've never even laid eyes on her. They've never even spoken to her. So it's our position that that's not reasonable.
The stories continue. I'm litigating a case right now against Prudential for a high-level executive who was also making over $200,000 a year for a very large company that had over 1,000 employees. It's actually a company that grosses $35 billion a year. So she was in a very big job. She's like 52 years old. She had neck surgery, ended up trying to return to work after having the neck surgery, still was having numbness and pain in her hands, and decided then that her doctor said, well, maybe you have carpal tunnel. So they ended up doing surgery on her right wrist and then on her left wrist. And she was never able to return to work because she was still having the chronic pain in her neck. She also developed chronic pain in her back. She had injections in her back subsequently. All of these things going on. And she gets paid the short term, by all people, Sedgwick. And then she goes to file for long term, and Prudential denies her and never pays her. So when they do the appeal, which I ended up working on, she ends up going for a functional capacity exam. She has additional medical support from 3 of her physicians who say there's no way she could work in any capacity, let alone returning to a job making $200,000 a year as a vice president. And Prudential just hires one doctor to review her claim. And the doctor reviews all of the records. There's no video surveillance or anything. There's no physical exam of her by them. And he basically says, well, I find there's no restrictions, limitations from this particular date. Well, it turns out that the date that the Prudential doctor selected was the same date that she had surgery on her wrist. So I don't know how this is the level of poor file review that's coming out of Prudential, that they hire a doctor who says you have no restrictions, limitations on the same day that you have surgery, and then have another surgery 2 weeks later and still say you have no restrictions or limitations.
Right.
And what's bad, it's bad enough that this doctor who's paid, and he was a younger doctor, I looked him up, who can say that, but then it goes to Prudential, who's supposed to review all the records. They're not supposed to just agree with whatever the doctor says. And the person at Prudential doesn't even realize that, oh, well, maybe this doctor made a mistake, or maybe he missed the fact that she had surgery on this date,
Right.
and still denies her. So basically what that says to me, that I've always known, it's just further proof, is that these people inside of the insurance company who are reviewing the claims are basically paper pushers or puppets. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to insult them, because that's what they've been trained to do, in the sense that they've been trained to say, get a report from a doctor, and whatever that doctor says, you have to adopt what that doctor says. They don't have any free spirit, any ability to make their own determination, because if they go against that doctor's report, they probably risk being fired. So,
Sure.
We do everything we can to prepare against that, but even though they get those, those I don't know other word to say than BS, unreliable reports,
Right.
you still as a claimant can very much win your claim. If it's not an appeal, you have a great chance of winning your case in litigation.
Right.
And like you're litigating one of your cases, I'm litigating my case right now, which we both think are very favorable cases. This is the nature of what Prudential does and many other companies. And they're entitled to have a difference of opinion, and hopefully a judge will sort through everything and make the right determination.
Well, the positive thing about suing Prudential, as you know, is that with most insurance companies, the standard of review is arbitrary and capricious. And a lot of times with Prudential, since their discretionary clause is not necessarily in their policy, we can get a de novo review.
In some of their policies.
In some of their policies, right. So a lot of times, we normally don't have a leg up with these ERISA cases, and in Prudential cases, sometimes we can get a de novo review, which does make a big difference in winning the case.
Right.
Yeah.
So no matter what stage or what level your claim is at with Prudential, feel free to call Rachel, myself, or any of the disability attorneys here. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you with your claim. We always offer a free consultation to review your claim, and we'll let you know right away whether or not we think we can help you.
Thank you.